and the rhododendrons open, you know that spring really has arrived. Time was when they were just those vast billowing banks of evergreen leaves that you saw in the stockbroker belt. But now, with these beautiful compact varieties, they're suitable for any garden, provided it's not on chalk or limestone. At this time of year, they'll simply smother themselves in flower. On this week's programme, Pippa Greenwood's kitchen garden is ready for seed sowing. Gay Search has planting schemes in mind for her series Living Space. And Stephen Lacey visits a garden filled with the sweet fragrance of a Daphne collection at Brandymount House in Hampshire. They say that even the best regulated households have fleas. Well, if that's the case, the best regulated gardens have moss. Looking at my lawn here, after that soggy winter, there's more moss than grass, and that means it's out with the wire-tooth rake, your favourite implement, to pull it out. You never knew there was so much in there. What this does do is open up spaces which can now be colonised by the grass, and in a couple of weeks' time you can encourage the grass to fill those spaces by applying a combined fertiliser and moss killer. But what do you do with all this moss you've got out? You could throw it on the compost heap, or alternatively, you could use it to line your hanging baskets. But if you haven't even got moss growing where your lawn's meant to be, you've just got bare earth, then now's a good time to do something about reseeding. This patch of lawn here was beginning to fall down my garden, so we retained this edge with some stout timber. This was infilled with compost and soil, and last autumn I sowed seed, but as you can see, it was a bit too late, it was a bit too cold, and it didn't take. But now is the time, as they say in all the good gardening programmes, to sow grass seed right on through May. Just prick over with a fork the bare soil in between those pieces of grass. But just tease up the earth that's bare. You might say to yourself, why isn't he using a rake? Well, a rake can't cultivate quite deeply enough to let those grass seed roots get down. And if you do come across any broadleaf weeds, just oik them out with your fingers while you're at it. You'll need about 2 clenched fistfuls to the square yard. That's about 1.5 ounces, but I've never known anybody weigh it. This, by the way, is what they call a multi-purpose mixture, which contains dwarf ryegrasses for a hard-wearing lawn. And being dwarf, they won't stick up when you're mowing. That should just about do it. And it's then that the rake does come into play, just to lightly work that seed into the surface. If it stays dry for quite a few days afterwards, you'll need to water the seed in. But knowing our climate, there'll be a lovely shower. And as with the hardy annuals I sowed last week on the border, you can keep cats and birds off grass seed with a few twiggy pea sticks laid over the top. And then by the summer it'll be a lovely green sward here, and you'll wonder what to do with it when it comes to mowing. Ivan Hicks has got an inspired idea for you in this week's Garden Cuttings.
Well, it's about this time of year when you ought to be giving your grass its first cut. Why not be a little bit more artistic and do something different? Use your lawn as a canvas and your lawnmower as a paintbrush. You could make a pattern or even a maze in the grass. The first thing you need is a lawnmower. Any lawnmower will do, but a rotary mower is ideal because you can adjust and control the height. The second thing you need is space. I've been lucky, I've been given permission to use this as my canvas, but you might be able to use your local community area or even your school. But even the smallest garden has potential. Because I like organic shapes, I'm going to cut myself a giant spiral here, but what I need to do initially is to cut myself a solid circle, about 10 foot across. And now I'm going to veer off in a spiral in action. I'm not going to measure it, I'm just going to do it by eye. I'm just going to keep going until I disappear. Now this is just the first rough cut, a guide if you like. I'm now going to set the blades lower and make a second deeper cut, which will make a stronger contrast. Sometimes it's even worth going over your pattern a third time for extra emphasis. Oh, a bit dizzy after that. Finally, you need some children to get maximum enjoyment. You'll be amazed how much children love playing on these grassy patterns. Hooray!
I've got a maze on my own lawn this week, but not thanks to mowing it, thanks to the sun through the branches of the oak tree. And if all you've got in your garden is lawn, simply because you find plants just so confusing, well, Gay Search is here to lead you through that particular maze in this week's Living Space.
Once you've got the bones of your garden sorted, you're ready for the real fun bit, choosing the plants. Now, it's true to say that what a lot of new gardeners do is dash down to the garden centre with bags of enthusiasm and simply fill their trolley with everything that catches their eye. Well, that way, potential disaster lies, or at the very best, a garden that just looks good at this time of the year. Much better to do a little bit of homework, write yourself a shopping list. That's the way to find the plants that are right for your garden. The first rule of planting is don't fight nature. Choose the plants that are going to thrive in the conditions you have on offer. So, for example, if you have an acid soil, things like rhododendrons and camellias will love it. If you've got a limey soil, though, they will slowly sicken and die. If your soil is sticky, heavy clay, then Mediterranean plants like lavender and rosemary won't grow very well for you because they need thin, free-draining soil. But the good news is that no matter what the conditions are in your garden, there are plenty of plants that will do really well. The first thing to do is get to know your soil. Is it thick and sticky or fine and sandy? And find out whether it's acid or limey by using a soil testing kit from your local garden centre. The colours are never actually as bright as they are on the card, but even so, you can see that this is acid, though your soil could be neutral or limey. Obviously, the amount of sun and shade you get in your garden will also dictate the choice of plants. New gardeners often think of shade as a problem, but in fact there are so many beautiful shade-loving plants like hostas, ferns, Japanese anemones, that if you didn't have any shade in your garden, you'd want to create some. If you're very busy, then forget about high-maintenance bedding plants and go instead for something like these, low-maintenance shrubs that really do look after themselves. Cotoneastas, for example. Choisia. And of course, good old reliable euonymus. And then, of course, think about the style of garden you've chosen. If you've gone for a cottage garden look, then choose traditional favourites. Lupins, foxgloves, poppies, asters, roses and honeysuckle, with herbs like rosemary and sage perhaps all jumbled in together. If you've gone for a simpler, more architectural look, go for architectural plants, those with big dramatic leaves like palms, spiky phormiums. Or for a more formal look, plant box hedges, create a little knot garden, or invest in some topiary. And think too about your colour scheme. Hot reds and oranges will be vibrant and exciting, while softer pastels suit an English country garden mood. Think about different schemes for different seasons. Cheery yellows and blues in spring perhaps, and warm shades in autumn and winter, with bonfire autumn foliage, bright berries and bark. I hope these few simple rules of thumb will help you to make the right choice of plants for your garden, because at the end of the day it is your garden, so it's important that you choose plants you like and are going to be happy to live with. If you happen to see something that you just can't resist, even if it isn't on your plan, then buy it and simply adjust the planting around it. Next week, the finishing touches, the pots, the furniture, the features that make such a contribution to the style of your living space.
When you go to the garden centre looking for plants for your garden, the ones you always fall for are those that are in bloom and looking good right now. And why not? Things like Viburnum carlesii aurora. You'd have a heart of stone if you didn't buy this when you saw it in flower. But also look at other things which are just about to give of their best. Doesn't look much at the moment, does it? But when you look down in the centre, there you can see them, the unfurling crooks of the shuttlecock fern, Mattiusia struthiopteris. A wonderful plant for damp soil in shade where it'll run very pleasantly, as it is here, making a little grove. I've left the central faded fronds on because these are the ones that carry spores, the fern's way of propagating itself. It doesn't produce seeds, just spores. They've shed all the spores they're going to now, so there's no harm in getting rid of them all. It's now got room to grow unimpeded by all these old and faded fronds, and you can just clear them up and take them away, and it's going to look gorgeous. Of course, some ferns have looked good right the way through the winter. This is a tree fern which is native to Tasmania, New Zealand, Dicksonia antarctica, a wonderfully statuesque plant, not normally hardy in British winters. It does need a bit of lagging. I've stuffed into the centre here a good handful of straw. You can use bracken, and as yet the shepherd's crooks aren't coming out of here. In really hard winters they need much more lagging than this, but because this winter's been so mild, I've got away with these last year's fronds staying, and I'm going to get even more coming out of the top. It is a wonderfully statuesque plant for a sheltered shady spot, but it will cost you about £30 a foot. I know it sounds expensive, but the taller the plant, the more likely it is to get through the winter because the growing point is further away from the ground. But there are other ferns, shorter and much cheaper, which are wonderful ground cover for dryish shade. I wish more people had realised the value of some ferns for dry, shady spots. These are three little beauties which really will put up with it quite happily. There's a crested form of the common hart's tongue fern with evergreen leaves right the way through the year. You just need to snip off the faded ones each spring. And this is a type of male fern called Barnesii. It's about the tallest fern for dry shade, growing up to 3 or 4 feet high. And then this little beauty that looks as though it would melt if you breathed on it. A beautiful little fern which, like a lot of them, has a mouthful of a name. Polisticum setiferum plumoso multilobum. No plant should have to labour under a name like that, but never mind, if I prepare the soil well, along with its other two mates, it'll grow really well. I'm just forking in plenty of well-rotted garden compost or leaf mould. They don't really need manure, it's not nutrition they're after, it's just the moisture-holding capacity of this organic matter. The soil needs to look as though you could eat it, just like fruitcake when you've finished your forking in. And then it's simply a matter of making sure that they've been well watered in the containers, tapping them out and scooping a hole out with your trowel. Leave the soil nice and fluffy like that and just firm it gently around the root ball. That'll grow well though when the leaves come out on the oak tree, but just now it's nice for me to feel the sun on my back. And Pippa Greenwood's been enjoying this fine weather in our part of Hampshire, and she's been doing some seed sowing in her organic kitchen garden.
At last the weather's dried up and it's hugely increased the range of what I can get on and do in the kitchen garden. I've been able to prepare areas for the planting of my onion sets and garlic and for the sowing of some of my vegetable seeds. So this week I'm going to start with parsnips. Roasted or turned into curried parsnip soup, the unusual sweetness and flavour of these root vegetables really comes into its own. Parsnips, like carrots, really resent the disturbance of being transplanted, so they are best sown direct where you intend them to grow. All you need to do is to prepare the seed bed by raking it over really thoroughly and getting off the lumps and stones, and then mark out the drill using a line. Stretch it taut, getting it as straight as you can. Then you need to use the point of a trowel or hoe to mark out the drill. Now the depth of the drill is going to vary with the type of seed you sow. You just check the packet to find that out. But whatever the answer, make sure that it's an even depth, or else you're going to get the seeds germinating and coming up erratically. For both carrots and parsnips, it needs to be about 1/2 inch deep. For my parsnips, I've chosen Avon Resistor because it's sitting pretty good on shallow soils, and also for an organic kitchen garden like this, it's perfect because it's resistant to canker disease. Now I'm station sowing the parsnips. That's putting between 2 and 4 seeds in each position. It's a really useful technique that for something like parsnips, which are notorious for poor germination. I'm going to sow these clutches of seeds about 3 inches, 7.5 centimetres apart, in rows that are going to be about 8 inches or 20 centimetres apart. Now, parsnip seeds are very slow to germinate, and meanwhile, there are going to be an awful lot of weeds developing. So to make it easier to see where the parsnips have been sown, I'm going to intersow with some fairly small growing lettuces. Lettuce are going to be up and germinating very rapidly. Mark out the rows and make it easier for me to weed, and I'll have the added benefit of getting 2 crops of 1 single row on the veg plot. When you've got to the end of the row, you simply gently press the seeds into the soil using your fingers, and then use the hoe or rake to push the soil over the length of the entire row. It's also a good time to start successional sowings of other vegetables such as carrots, peas, leeks, kohlrabi and spinach. But before I do that, I'm going to start planting my onions and garlic. Choose different coloured varieties of onion and they can decorate your kitchen and your dinner plate. Bulbs of garlic woven into a plait can also look too good to eat. I've been itching to get on and plant my onion sets and garlic. Now for the onions, I've chosen sets rather than seed, as they tend to be less disease prone than onions raised from seed, and they're also more likely to do quite well on my rather too heavy soil. I'm just nestling these in so that the necks of each bulb is just protruding above the soil surface. Now watch out that you don't plant them too shallowly though, because if you do, you'll find that the birds whisk them out of the soil before they've managed to root properly. Each onion bulb is going in 2 to 4 inches apart, that's 5 to 10 centimetres apart, in rows that are going to be about 10 inches apart. Now when it comes to choosing onion sets, if possible you want to get those which are quite small or described as being heat treated, because that way they're less inclined to bolt or run to seed. Now with the garlic, you need to plant on a ridge if you've got a heavy soil like mine, because that will improve drainage and mean that you're likely to get a much better crop. The individual cloves go in about 2 inches deep and about 6 inches apart. When you buy your garlic for planting, for heaven's sake, don't feel inclined to economise and use something you bought in the supermarket or greengrocer, because that often harbours a virus infection which can wreck the ultimate crop. Instead, get it from a seed catalogue or garden centre and you'll find you get much better results. Now, it looks to me as if the weather's on the turn again, so I'm going to nip back inside. There's been a lot of activity in the propagator, and my tomato seedlings are now ready to be pricked out. Make sure the trays are well watered and then use a dibber or pencil to gently ease the seedlings out of the tray. When you handle them, make sure you only do so by the seed leaves. If you touch the true leaves or the stems of the plants, you're likely to do an awful lot of damage. Now I'm just transplanting these into individual 2 to 3 inch, that's 5 to 7.5 centimetre diameter pots of multi-purpose compost. Once they're into their new pots, then you simply use the dibber to ease the compost around the roots. Then it's time to water them well, and remember when you do that you always want to use mains water rather than water butt water, because otherwise you're likely to introduce diseases like damping off. Then put the tray in a well lit position to let the seedlings grow on and label it carefully. And in a few weeks I'll be back getting on with more work in the kitchen garden, including taking a look at some of the things you can use to protect your developing crops from adverse weather conditions.
If you rely a lot in your garden for summer colour on bedding plants, you won't need me to tell you that this is about the busiest time of the year. Sowing, pricking out, the whole kit and caboodle. But there are shortcuts you can take nowadays. These plants I grew myself, petunias raised from seed, and they need pricking out into seed trays of multi-purpose compost. But there are lots of different seed trays. This one is a flimsy plastic one and quite shallow. This one is rigid plastic and deeper. What's the difference? You save a lot of money on compost and on trays if you use those shallow, flimsy ones. They're only going to be in there for a month and a bit, and that'll do nicely. Now, if you're panicking that you haven't sown your own bedding plants, and oh, you're going to be late, and you're not going to have any plants, don't worry. Garden centres are full of these plug plants. Very good value for money. Here we've got verbena, an annual dianthus, or pink, and busy lizzies, everybody's favourite. They flower their hats off right through the summer. 12 plants in a unit, costing about £2.99. It's even cheaper if you buy them like this. Here's lobelia, cheek by jowl, dense in these tiny little plugs. Fibrous rooted semperflorens begonias, busy lizzies again, and pelargoniums. And they're growing in these little plastic topped trays. 42 plants for £4.99. Pretty good value, 10 pence a plant. The way to transplant these, and here I am using the deeper tray because they're a bit bigger and they could do with that extra root, is to get either a blunt pencil or one of these dibbers and just push up each little plug. Wonderful, isn't it? Out it comes. Lift it out there. And then with the fatter end, beautifully constructed, push that into there and it lowers straight into that hole. Firm the compost around it. There we are. I love pricking out. It's very satisfying. What I need to do now is water them in and then put them back in the greenhouse where they'll have a little bit of heat and be protected from frost at night, and they can be planted out in the garden at the end of May to give me a summer full of colour. Other jobs you can be getting on with this week. Take shoot tip cuttings of herbs such as thyme, rosemary and sage. Cut back heathers that have finished flowering. Start planting in ponds when the weather's warm. And on warm and sunny days, remember to ventilate your greenhouse to give bedding plants an airing. It's also a great time of year for enjoying fragrant flowers like these narcissi, white cheerfulness. Stephen Lacey's got an absolute nose full of scent with a national collection of Daphnes at Brandymount House in Hampshire.
Well, spring's surging ahead now and new plants are opening by the day. This garden in the centre of Alresford is certainly one that wakes up fast. It's the garden of a former botany teacher, Michael Barron, a real plantsman's acre, full of notable collections of early bulbs, shrubs and perennials, the result of a lifetime study, collecting and swapping. But Daphnes are your chief interest, aren't they, Michael?
They've been a great interest for so long I can hardly remember. Back after the war I started looking at them in France and came back with one or two and grown more and more.
What appealed about them?
The scent, the fact that they flower early in the year, many of them, and I think as an alpine gardener there are really few shrubs which suit an alpine garden better than the smaller Daphnes. This of course is a bigger one, but the best Daphne probably for scent.
This is Odora.
Odora aereo marginata, in rather good form, this.
They're notoriously tricky plants, aren't they? I mean,
They are
often get viruses.
very fickle, very bolshy. The great thing to do with Daphnes is to grow small plants. Start with small ones and they'll either die straight away or they'll bomb away, get their roots down and they're off.
Right.
But if you buy old plants that have been in their pots for a long time, then very rarely do they settle and they just take 2 or 3 years to die and it's very depressing.
And they all want pretty good drainage, don't they?
They want everything. They want mostly sun and lots of water, lots of drainage, really good conditions, and they'll be all right.
So this is a moderately cold garden, is it, Michael?
Well, we're on a little knoll here, and the wind blows through it quite well.
You still get a bit of late frost?
We get late frosts galore, and they do a lot of damage to the clematis and blossom and so on.
But the soil's actually pretty dry. I mean, is this chalk?
Very chalky, dries up very much in high summer. Even now, after the wet winter, we're still drying up surprisingly quickly, and I've had to water a bit.
Right. You have obviously favourite groups of plants, and you build sort of little collections in different parts of the garden.
I think that's the botanist in me. As soon as you start to have one or two, and then I want a few more.
Pulmonaras, obviously,
They've done very well here. We cleared this area, took out some leyland cypress behind, and this has let a lot more light in, obviously, and fortified the soil, put a lot more compost in. And the pulmonaras really love it.
There's a good tapestry, those different pulmonara colours. They're good together.
They look very good, and I think they look well with the spiky leaves of the old snowdrops. We've done a lot to modify the soil in this area so as to be able to grow lots of these rhododendrons and trilliums and things. I mean, down here, about 1.5 feet deep, we've got a layer of polythene. Not a very complete one. It probably allows a certain amount of drainage, but it does keep the water up.
Right.
And of course, it keeps the chalky soil out of the way. But this has suited the trilliums extremely well.
Superb display, it really is. That's chloropetalum, is it?
Yes, it's got various names, but the modern name is Kurabayashi, but it used to be called chloropetalum. It's a wonderful plant. It grows very easily.
Lovely little pink trillium at the back.
The pink's a great delight. This is Trillium rivale, which grows perfectly well outside and does indeed seed itself around a bit, but it makes a most wonderful greenhouse plant. Well, this is the Trillium we saw in the open garden, and I bring it in about now to enjoy the flowers.
Wonderful in here, isn't it? And it's actually dropping seedlings.
Yes, when it's finished flowering, it turns its flower heads down and the seed gets deposited at its base and they come popping up like cress.
Terrific. There's a lot happening now, but how long can you keep the display going for, Michael?
Well, probably until midsummer. We've got the snowdrops obviously over now.
Yeah, I love certainly all these bulbs pushing through herbaceous plants.
That's a plant I'm particularly fond of.
A little scilla.
It's a very attractive, slightly slaty grey form.
So the geranium will take over from this mass of bulbs.
There'll be another month or two. We've got an honesty coming. And then later in the year, a lot of the rather tough border campanulas.
Oh yes, some peonies, and is that Smilacina at the back pushing through?
Smilacina, which is a strange plant to see there because the books all tell you that it doesn't like chalk, but it grows perfectly well here in the driest of chalk.
Yeah, so quite a succession. But nice to start with such a strong flush, isn't it, to really kick-start the season?
As well, the season began here in the autumn almost, and it's gone on and on.
And at this time of year, you know there's even more to come. That's it for this week. On next week's programme, Gay Search adds the finishing touches in her series Living Spaces, as well as meeting Ruth Salisbury in her small spring garden in Clevedon near Bristol. And I'll be back here in my Hampshire garden, hoping for a bit more of this. Whatever the weather this weekend, enjoy your garden. Ta-da.
Making a terrible mess of the lawn next tonight, the US Masters Golf. Day 2 live on BBC 2 next. Alan Titchmarsh recommends a selection of shade-loving plants to help brighten the gloomiest of gardens in the May issue of the BBC Gardeners World magazine.